Hello, beautiful human beings. Welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. Today's episode, we're going to go through exploring the polarities between neediness in a relationship versus sovereignty. And this is essentially, is it healthier to approach the situation from a place of really honoring one's needs and then trying to get them met from the other person? Or is it healthier to be able to approach the situation as two wholes coming together? Codependence versus interdependence. And I've been deliberating this topic for a little while now because romantic relationship for me over the last couple of years since I've been in a relationship with Shana has really been an overwhelming area that I've had some serious challenges in. So I've been pulling all the stops out, reading the books, doing the research, just sitting with myself and attempting to understand these topics with more depth. And it's this topic that we explore today will be somewhat overlapping to our boundaries barriers, that episode that I did, but with a lot more of a focus on romantic relationships and those dynamics directly. So the last thing I'll say is that I'm also going to be breaking down and giving a bit of a book summary / book review, more accurately, on Attached, which I've read a couple of times now at various stages of my learning journey in relationship, and whole new level of awareness reading it recently. Some things that I really liked and some things that I didn't like as much. I'm going to talk about all of that. So before jumping into the episode, please give this podcast a review if you haven't already. It really does make a difference for this channel and the reach, and it's super appreciated. And keep an eye out because I'm going to be doing Vedic meditation courses in Melbourne very soon, then when I'll be back from India. And I'd love to support you to officially become a meditator. So keep an eye out for that. Let's jump into today's episode. So just acknowledging the vast differences between some stances that people have in the personal development, spiritual development, healing worlds around what's healthy in a relationship. Some people stand way over on the camp of it is important to be two wholes coming together and then meeting in our wholeness and then exchanging love because we want to, but not because we have to. And that is a very regimented perspective that a huge percentage of people in the spirituality space hold. That is interdependence. And there are some really light qualities to that, some really light aspects to that, meaning some really constructive and healthy aspects to that. And then on the other side of the camp, there's this idea of I am meant to be in a relationship. That's what I've been programmed and designed for in my biology, to actually attach and have codependence depend on each other to advance my chances of survival. That's literally what I've been wired for. And I see that point. I see that point. I understand that point. And so let's look at a couple of things here. First and foremost, creating some context of the truism in this and the different influence on both of these perspectives. So we have the codependent perspective, which is, hey, this is how we're wired. Let's work with that. And I think there's a lot of maturity in that because it's working with what is. It's a bit less. It's a little bit less best case scenario thinking and idealism, and it's a bit more pragmatic. This is how we're wired. This is how it works. Let's get it. Let's work together in this. And I've been thinking a lot recently about relationships from that stance and kind of seeing in my observation and understanding, some people have really successful marriages. They've been together for 40 years. They don't have much intimacy. They don't consider themselves students of personal and spiritual development. And there isn't a big depth of connection there where they are on the spiritual journey to be able to open up to wholeness. So they're not meeting each other in unconditional deep love and being able to have a level of depth and intimacy and emotional support and exchanging of my soul meets your soul. However, they're together and they kind of accept themselves in a certain way for where they are, and their random mix of light qualities and shadow qualities, of which they probably don't want to lean into much. I'm just stereotyping some successful, I'm just going to say more mainstream relationships that actually have been effective, and they somehow make that work. And I've really looked at this and just been like, wow, this is so interesting. And I've got lots of examples of it with family, friends, and in family in general, where it's like they've been married for 20, 30 years. So something's working, right? But the level of depth and vulnerability and openness and communication and conflict resolution, they're not going into the depths. And it was interesting because when I was reading the Attached book, one thing I really love about it is that there are a lot of examples and scenarios that they give throughout the book. And as the reader, you're invited to make a guess over, was what I just described with this scenario healthy or unhealthy? And sometimes when I was looking at those scenarios and reading through, I was looking at the communication that one of the characters in the scenario is showing, thinking there's projection there, there's anger there, there's not full responsibility being taken here. There's not that sovereign, whole, interdependent kind of energy there. And then I get to the end of the scenario and look at the answer, and the answer is healthy. And I'm like, whoa, okay. That's interesting. That's interesting because I can see the aspects of what they're saying that is healthy, but I can also see that it could have been communicated with a lot more self-awareness. And if that person had done a lot more spiritual development and personal growth, then they probably would have communicated through that scenario with a lot more grace. And so this is just food for thought and things that I'm bringing into this discussion, because have you guys thought about this before? Oh, I'm on this personal growth journey. I've been doing this for ages, and I read the books and I understand nonviolent communication and I understand attachment theory, and I'm working on myself and I'm doing emotional healing work and all this stuff. Yet you may have popped in and out of relationships or have your relationship not really functioning very healthily, and your parents are still together, or your uncle and auntie are still together, or your family friends are still together, and they don't do any of this work. What's going on there? And that brings me to a point of, I'm going to summarize the perspective that the Attached book holds, that I feel is quite in favor of this polarity of codependence, seen through the lens of healthy codependence. And so the theory of the book is, some people are avoidant attachment style. Some people are anxious attachment style. Some people are secure attachment style. And when you go into a relationship, as human beings, we rely on each other for survival. The reason that we have relationships is because history has proven that if we get into a relationship, we can leverage the strengths and weaknesses of both people and lean on each other for support, which aids our chance of survival. It aids our chance of survival. And people that are anxious attachment or secure attachment know I need this other person for survival. People that are anxious are like more scared of not having the other person. The person that's secure still knows that they need someone else for survival and that their life's going to be better with that other person in it. But they have less fear attached to it. So they're a bit more of a secure base. Now, apparently, people that are avoidant in nature and avoidant in relationships, that feel uncomfortable in intimacy and do what they call in the book deactivating strategies. So they do little behaviors that actually create distance from intimacy. So if they're walking and they point out a flaw of their partner, that is a deactivating strategy because it's trying to turn off what they are insinuating as a natural, healthy part of being a human, which is to activate the attachment drivers within us to say, hey, I want to support that person. I want to be close to that person. And someone that is secure, when they get to closeness, it promotes more closeness. If someone's anxious attachment and someone creates closeness with them, they want to create even more closeness. So closeness creates closeness. When it comes to an avoidant attachment person, their theory is that they have in their lineage or from a gene perspective adapted to not relying on that other person for survival, but in times of war or extreme stressful situations, they couldn't trust or rely on other people. So they had to become hyper-focused on competence in life. Someone that's avoidant attachment doesn't trust that the other person would aid their survival. In a war and stuff, they've got to become completely competent themselves at approaching difficult situations. And so they look at life more through the lens of, is that person competent or not? And instead of just having this person in my life is going to improve my chance of survival, this avoidant attachment style has got programming in their ancestry that says your best chance of survival is to be more sovereign and be damn good at everything. That's going to give you the greatest chance of navigating threats in war-torn situations, and that's going to give you the best chance if food was really scarce and it was in a famine to be really critically thinking and super strategic about how you're going to get the food, how you're going to convince people, manipulate people, beg, borrow, and steal to keep yourself alive. And that's the avoidant energy. Then closeness with other people for an avoidant attachment style doesn't lead to more closeness like it would with secure and anxious people. More closeness to an avoidant person actually causes them to want to create distance from that closeness. So their partner starts being really affectionate and then they pull back. They don't lean in more, they pull back because they go, hey, us getting more close is actually going to be more detrimental for my survival based on what my ancestry, my genes, my DNA tells me. And so that's just an interesting piece. The theory, though, of the book is we are meant to be in relationship to aid our survival. That's what we're designed for as Homo sapiens, just like other animals in the wild. They become a mating pair and they stay together because they think that together they've got a higher chance of survival than separate. That's what our genes are telling us, and that's what the book is pointing to. So in the book, it's leveraging the idea of codependence as a strength. If someone's in and I'll give you a prime example to delineate between what the codependent perspective would be versus the sovereign perspective. If someone is crying and projecting a little bit and they're like, you didn't do what you didn't even think about me today. Instead of taking a pause and saying, hey, I hear that, what you're saying, and I just want to name that when you're saying that this is a nonviolent communication, when you're saying that, I'm feeling a bit scared, and I've got a need for respect. And so my request is, and that's nonviolent communication, stating what happened, stating how you feel, what your unmet need is, and then making a request. And so my request is, can you please just sit with yourself and come back to me when you've actually, this is a custom idea of what a request could be anything, but just an example. Can you sit with that and come back to me when you are feeling a bit more regulated, so that you don't, so that I feel safer. And that's kind of like, hey, you're projecting, in other words, and I feel unsafe. Go sort yourself, come back as a whole, and I'll meet you there. And that is more of the sovereign side. The book is saying if you were to do that, that would be unhealthy. And what would be a healthier approach is to not respond like that, but see, hey, my person is kind of testing me a while here. Instead of building on that or creating separation, I'm going to lean into what they need there, and I'm going to try to support them with what they need. I'm going to see, and this is the key to what the book's saying, see that their emotional well-being is my emotional well-being, because we're a unit, we're a team. And if that person's feeling frustrated and upset, because we're a unit and we feel into each other's energetic bubble that we live in, even if we're not in physical proximity, the way that they're feeling impacts the way that our life feels. So if they're feeling down, we get on that and we support it. And that's what the book's suggesting. It's taking that stance of they've got a problem. If it's their problem, it's our problem. Because if it impacts them, we're a unit, it impacts us. And it's seeing it as we are codependent. We're dependent on each other. And let's act in that way. How can I support this person? Because by supporting them, it's going to support me. Whereas I feel that the more new age spiritual stance would be, okay, cool. I'm a whole person. You're a whole person. If you cross that, you need to bring yourself back to wholeness. Meet me here in the wholeness, not project. You need to be able to stabilize yourself. You need to be able to stabilize yourself. If you need me, that's unhealthy. And the book is saying needing people is healthy. The illusion that we don't need other people is unhealthy. And it's healthy to need other people. So on the end of the polarity here of neediness and codependence, one thing that I found really interesting was the book was giving a lot of permission to needs. We have needs. We're humans with needs. That's why we have a partner. If we didn't have needs, why would we need a partner? And then some other ammunition I want to throw on this end of the debate in a way, or discussion, is I've heard an extreme advocate of masculinity and traditional masculine feminine values preach really intensely about this with a lot of love as well. With this man saying all about men being strong, men being providers, and women being strong, but as nurturers. And what he was saying, he was an older gentleman, 70 odd years old, very fit, very strong, very healthy, very heart-centered, very passionate, very masculine as well. And he was saying, if you try to be with someone that's like you, because you're having their masculine and your feminine, they have their masculine and feminine, why do you need each other? Why do you need each other? If my partner goes to work, makes her money, comes home, can do the dishes, does the cooking, all that stuff, she doesn't need me. So what's the point? What's the point? And then he was saying, if you're a man and you're providing, and then you just meet another woman that's providing as well, what's the point? Where's the collaboration? Where's the teamwork? Where's the leveraging different skills and and that kind of stance. And it did have me thinking. It is an important perspective. It's an important perspective because I know for a lot of men, I know being a man and talking to a lot of men, feeling a little bit less needed, less important. I noticed that if I'm in a social space and there are more traditional men that I'm just going to say are 40 years old, 40 or older, and they're not in touch with their emotions, they're not spiritually aware, and they're not into all this work. They're just looking for ways to feel important. That's it. I just witness it. 60-year-old men, 50-year-old men. What can I do? You want me to take that out there? Oh, I feel all important. I'm taking it out there. Yeah, I've got something to do. And then when there's nothing to do, they're just standing around bored, feeling like, what's the point? Maybe they'll go into their own world and then sit in front of the TV, watch some sport or water the garden, or they want to do something. They want to be relevant and important. And I feel to a certain degree, almost like the degendering in a way and the depolarization between men and women both becoming whole, perfect beings that have masculine and feminine. In a way, it is making that clear delineation between different skill sets and different contributions so that there is a clear need for each other and a feeling of, well, I need you for this and you need me for this. It's not like a real tit for tat thing. It's just there's a lane that each person's in, and that lane gives the other person heaps of benefit that they can be deeply grateful for, appreciative of, and understand the differences of. And I understand that what I'm bringing in as a perspective that this man shared from this keynote is going to be more controversial and it's going to be more jarring for some people if you're listening, potentially. But let's just look at all the different perspectives in this situation, because that's a form of neediness. And so this book was saying if someone's got an anxious attachment style, they don't have to learn to become sovereign and interdependent. They just need to find someone that's a securely attached person, that when they go into their need for touch, need for this, it's not, the secure person isn't avoidant and says, hey, you deal with this because you coming at me with all this neediness is making me feel uncomfortable. They can say and see and respond with some sensitivity to what's needed in that moment to allow that person to feel soothed. They're anxiously attached. They need me to call them. I'm not just going to pull away or, teach them to love themselves. I'm actually going to go, this person is programmed in a way where they feel the need to have extra validation. So I'm just going to give it to them so that they feel safe and they know that they can depend on me. They're codependent. We're codependent. We depend on each other in different ways. This person's feeling unsafe. I'm going to be a dependable source of safety with this person right now. That's interesting. That's an interesting perspective. Now, one thing that I found triggering about the book for me because of my own shame and insecurities is that the book definitely, in the reading tone, the unspoken energy of the book from my interpretation, was that there was a vilification of avoidant attachment. It was a lot healthier to be seen as anxious than it was avoidant. And there wasn't really much focus on holding equal compassion if someone's anxious and equal compassion if someone's avoidant. There was more of anxious is more towards what the authors of the book see as healthy, which is, hey, people are meant to need each other and want to lean into more closeness. Someone that's got anxious attachment, that's what they do. Avoidant, yikes, there's a little bit more of a problem here. Whereas as someone that has avoidant tendency, I was reading it feeling a little bit unseen, a little bit like and this is a bit of a chapter that I'm going through, and part of what's inspired this episode is a stand for compassion for myself and other people that have avoidant tendencies. And so that leads me to discuss the point now of the other side of the equation, which is more of the sovereign wholeness. There is power in this other perspective too. There is power. I'm going to explain this perspective, and then we're going to come together and go, how can we get the most out of integrating both? Now, if this book is written, I didn't close a loop that I've been thinking about recently on the last one, so I'm going to mention that now, which is that I've realized that the vast majority of people in relationship are unconscious human beings in their life and in the world. In other words, most of the population are in the matrix. They don't meditate. They don't have self-awareness. They're busy. They've got addictive tendencies. The average phone time around the world's 7 to 8 hours a day of screen time, which means most people are spending half their day. That's the average. So most people are spending half of their waking life on their phone. And so most people wake up to an alarm. They're dysregulated when they wake up because they haven't had enough sleep. And then to be able to synthetically boost them up, they have energy drinks and coffee, and therefore they're exhausted, not really much free will and willpower to be able to do healthy things. And so they'll be watching Netflix at the end of the day. And even if they're going to the gym, often that's not what's needed because they're not giving their nervous system enough time to receive. And so they're over relying on adrenaline, and they're giving too much energy to life because they're working, hustling, trying to be successful. But then they also have to look a certain way. So they're smashing Pilates classes or doing intense compound movements in the gym, CrossFit, things like this, and just absolutely sparking themselves. And they're also living unconsciously. They don't have awareness. Now, what I've been feeling into and just my own thought process and realizations recently, which I'm really fascinated about these perspectives I'm going to share, is that if most people are living in the matrix, most people are in a subtly dysregulated state or a very dysregulated state, which means they don't have a feeling internally of wholeness. And that presupposition is I'm safe. And because I'm safe, I can be present and enjoy the moment. I can be here for it. I've got self-awareness. I feel safe. And just like Joe Dispenza says, being in survival or the animal mind is not a place to change. It is not a place to change. Somewhere, sometime, somebody. And this, the way that the brain waves are operating are all non-coherently. They're in a stress response, a fear response. Now, if someone's living that lifestyle and they're in a relationship, this is what I've realized. And this is a theory that I feel very strongly is true. There's two people in a relationship. Statistically, they're probably in their head most of the time. They're in fear consciousness. So they don't have the wholeness because they don't have the space, time, and regulation to be able to sit and intentionally give love and presence to the other person. Just like their parents probably when they were growing up didn't have the safety regulation to give love and presence to them. And it gets inherited. Now, if there are two people that are dysregulated, a bad relationship is when each of those people, because they're dysregulated, they're in their job, they're doing all this stuff, they're trying hard, but they're in a fear response. Therefore, they're not present. They're looking for Netflix, looking for to take an edge off with some emotional eating. They're looking to scroll on the phone. They're just looking for ways to sedate themselves because they're feeling dysregulated. And that's what people do. They turn to short-term gratification, addictions, personality patterns that are from survival, safety patterns, and tell themselves a bunch of stories, and they're living in this hypnotic kind of rhythm. And so if at the end of the day, one person in their life that is not filled with presence and wholeness, but more of a dysregulated state, wants to meet their need for feeling unsafe and dysregulated by taking their edge off by going and eating at a fancy restaurant and having a nice wine. And that's how they kind of meet that need that's perpetuated from a state of dysregulation. I'm going to go emotionally eat to satiate and perpetuate the cycle of fear. If that then overlaps with their partners and they also they're a massive foodie and they live for the wine at the end of the day, and there's overlap between that, then both of those people are going to be able to find some level of connection in their dysfunction. Yeah. If there's two entrepreneurs, male, female, just in this example, that are heterosexual, get together, they both love business, they both feel like they're not enough and try to prove themselves to the world and try to be this power couple. And so they're not feeling enough. And so the pattern is go, 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 go. And they can go learn at events together. They can run their business together, and they're overworking. They're not present. They're not actually accessing authentic love because they're not connected to their authentic selves because they're in dysregulation all the time. So they're more acting in a trance, but their need to try to feel enough and get a nice car, and they go car shopping together. When they're trying to meet those needs that come from being dysregulated, if those two people find overlap in that, then they'll have some level of shared connection. But if you put two people that are just as dysregulated, just as connected to fear, just as struggling in their life, let's say, for example, you put someone that has a job, a little bit more mainstream, not into personal development, get to the end of the day, they just want to watch Netflix and just buzz out. That's how they deal with their dysregulated state. But their partner, who doesn't have a job, is a coach in the making and doesn't feel like they're enough, and so is always learning, always growing. They get to the end of the day and they're pushing themselves, going to the gym. And that person that's feeling inadequate and not enough, and that's how they're dealing with their dysregulation, they've got that personality pattern, that addiction to achievement, then judge their partner who's got a job, more stable, but still operating from fear. And that person that's a hardcore achiever is also operating from fear, but judging their other person. Then all of a sudden, there isn't that way of meeting their needs having an overlap. And so that relationship, even though the state of consciousness, I'd say for both people, is probably on par, they're both in fear, but the common interests of the way that they seek to behave from a state of fear doesn't overlap. And so you would look at that couple and go, they don't have as much connection in the unhealthy ways, but nevertheless, they don't have as much overlap, so they don't have as much connection. And you'd look at that and go, that relationship's not really functioning very well. If two people who are really busy, overworked, stressed, and they're looking for a hit, and they've both derived safety when they're dysregulated from getting off in physical intimacy and making love, which I definitely do, and myself and my partner can do this sometimes. We're not actually present fully there to enjoy the experience. We're using it for more of a short-term gratification piece. But the fear response behavior overlaps with each other. We find some kind of mutual connection. Is it deep? Is it conscious? Is it aware? Is it full of presence? Absolutely not. But in that moment, I could be under the illusion of, whoa, this is a great relationship, because our fear behavior overlaps with the other person's. And I feel like most people in society are either in a relationship where their behavior derived from fear overlaps, or their behavior that derives from fear doesn't overlap. One's a good relationship, one's a bad relationship. They're both based in fear, though. And that describes most relationships. And I think this book that's written for the masses, the attachment book, is, can we make this work even if we're not conscious? I'm feeling scared and insecure. Well, can you soothe me so I don't feel that? Oh, cool, temporary relief. Awesome. We've made this work. And I think I'd prefer to have overlapping fear responses versus not overlapping fear responses and behaviors and states in life with my partner, because I think that'd be more functional and we'd find more commonality and we'd still get that connection. Even if we're not aware and conscious for it and it's not deep connection, as humans, just being around each other, there's some element of soothing. Just like someone walking through nature, even if they're on their phone and they're not present, nature's still supporting them in some level. They're still getting some kind of benefit. Even though they're on their phone, they're not getting as much benefit. If there's people that are going together and they're raving and doing drugs at a festival in a very unconscious way, they're still on some level meeting their need for human connection, even though it's not very deep or healthy. So I think to a certain level, if someone can find a way of letting their wounds be supported by each other, there's a lot of benefit to that, because the reality is we're not going to be feeling whole, open-hearted, and connected to our higher self a lot of the time. And I feel like that's the point that this book is more pointing to. That's the point that the book is pointing to. Funny. Moving on from that. I perceive that it depends on how someone wants to approach their life as to whether or not codependence and neediness route is leveraged, or whether the wholeness route is leveraged. And I perceive that if you're listening to this podcast, that your goal is wholeness. The goal is to feel whole. And of course, we'd rather be walking around with an innate feeling of safety, presence, connectedness to life and ourselves and God and the universe, and a feeling of fulfillment, and then bring that wholeness to our relationship and bask in the overflow. I know that's the intention that you have if you're on this podcast. It's my intention too. And one thing that I found really, really powerful is realizing that if I am actually connected to my heart and I have awareness as a state that I've created through meditation and consciousness evolution, and growing internally and learning to love myself more, if through that I'm feeling more whole and more connected to my heart, I actually have more acceptance and understanding for my fear responses. That's what I'm finding. So when I'm reading this book, even though I'm going, well, I'm very on the spiritual path. I'm very devoted to feeling more whole, feeling more connected to my heart, more presence, and more fulfillment. That's definitely where I'm moving, and that's definitely what's happening. And at this stage of my evolution of wholeness, I'm seeing it as very important for me to say, hey, I do have needs. Actually, I do have needs. I actually do have a lot of fears in relationship. And so at the moment, I kind of am codependent. Instead of going, that's bad, I feel embarrassed because when I'm listening to Esther Hicks or listening to Teal Swan, the messages that are coming through are saying, hey, we need to meet in wholeness. I'm not saying that those two people preach that in solo, and that's their full message on it. But there's a lot of these new age spiritual teachers that talk about wholeness being the way to connect. And if someone's listening to that and they literally at their state of consciousness don't have the capacity to meet in wholeness with their partner, and they do have a lot of neediness, they do have neediness in the way of, I need to go towards you, or neediness, like in my case, where I need to have some space from you. The acknowledgement of the neediness and the compassion for the neediness and the acceptance for the neediness is actually an example of greater wholeness. I hope that's landing. Because that's my exact position right now. Seeing, okay, cool. We're human beings that are survival based. Cool. It's normal in our biology to want to attach and connect, and that's healthy. That's normal? Cool. That's looking at life through survival. That's what our genetics are. That's what our history is. I'm actually on a path where that's not the only perspective that I hold, because I'm working at connecting to oneness and embodying wholeness, which is not survival based. Even though what you're saying, authors of Attached book, is let's meet in wholeness, that is not what they're saying. Even though they're saying it is normal, it is healthy, it's we're coded for survival. We are in our survival brain, but I'm cultivating a connection to my prefrontal cortex. I'm cultivating a connection to my heart and wholeness and recognizing the truth of what I am, which is totality. It is isness. It's complete and utter everything. And that is also true. As well as we're programmed for connection and codependence. That's true. But we're also evolving to oneness. So I don't want to pencil myself into a reality that says one of these two are right, because they're both right. And with the awareness of I can meet you in wholeness, and that is a really advanced, emotionally mature, and beautiful, idealistic place to be, that, hey, I'm moving in that direction. I'm getting closer. However, there's a certain degree to which just full clarity and awareness and acceptance of where I am right now is the most loving, powerful approach to my relationship right now. Yeah, I want to meet you in wholeness, but I can't. So I'm actually needy and have all this anxious attachment. So I'm going to do my best to sit with my emotion, and I'm going to do my best to be able to not project and not do what they call protest behavior, which is I'm going to act out to try to get your attention just so you can validate me. I'm going to try not to do that, but I'm still going to do it. With my best efforts, I'm still going to do it. Because guess what? I'm not whole right now. I don't feel whole, and I'm actually not fully enlightened. So that being said, can you soothe me when I act out and do your best for that? Because I kind of need you. And then opposingly, for me, one thing that I'm really leaning into is holding a lot of acceptance and love for my avoidant attachment style. I've got some secure, and I've also got some avoidant. And the avoidant is very much there. And so for me, being able to accept my avoidance looks like I understand that closeness in an ideal relationship would actually encourage more closeness. But when you're bringing closeness to me, if I'm not in a fully regulated state and my current coding up in my brain says, this ain't safe. And sometimes I actually need some space. Even though that's not necessarily the healthiest thing, that's the healthiest thing for where I'm at. And I'm going to accept that. And in the acceptance of that, then I'm not coming from this state of self bypassing and gaslighting of like me saying to myself, hey, you don't deserve to take space right now. You should lean in right now. Closeness should promote closeness. There's something wrong with you. And that's the subconscious belief that I hold in my shame. There is something wrong with me. And so instead of saying, hey, I actually am imperfect, I'm actually not whole, even though I'm moving in that direction. And of course, I want to be able to allow closeness to promote more closeness and for wholeness to be able to meet you in the wholeness. But I ain't feeling whole around you sometimes. Sometimes I'm feeling whole and then I get around you and I'm feeling terrified. And that's something that I'm learning to accept within myself. Can you love me in those situations and teach me to love myself? Can you actually show me compassion when I'm projecting at you or doing deactivating strategies in attachment theory, doing things to try to create distance, saying little comments, doing a little gaslight, projecty kind of things, judging, pushing you away? when I'm doing that, can you actually bring in your awareness and compassion to try to teach me what love looks like in those situations? And if you're being anxiously attached towards me, instead of me saying, hey, that's not whole, you're not acting whole right now, you're coming from anxiety and attachment, for me, I'm going to try to go, hey, I still love you, and give you the affirmation you need, because that's where you're at. And when I'm in my avoidant, can you actually step in with more compassion and teach me that it's safe? Teach me that you're still going to love me when I get avoidant, because I need that. And if I could just click my fingers and not need it, I would. And I'd be whole and meet you in wholeness, and it'd be great. But that's just not reality right now for me. And so what does that look like for you? Where are you at in your journey of being anxious or avoidant attachment? What's your certain level of safety and intimacy? What are your needs? Because someone that's needy is not anxious or avoidant. Needy could be either. I really need space. Avoidant. I really need touch right now. I need you to affirm me. Anxious. From an attachment theory perspective. Yeah. So, AKA, it's okay to have needs. It's okay to be needy. It's just me. And there's nothing that we could do about it for that state of consciousness. I'm not someone now that believes in this idea of, I'm going to get the breakthrough. Well, I'm going to get the breakthrough and it's all going to change. Because I've been in this space for long enough to see that, sure, it's possible, and I'm open to that possibility, but I'm not going to put that pressure on myself, or the naivety or the immaturity that says, Tony Robbins, do a Dickens pattern on me and just make me associate so much pain to the life that I keep manifesting that I just can't help but move away from it. And it needs to change now. It's so painful. My life sucks and it just needs to go. I don't see that as the truth. I realize that my state of consciousness evolves slowly and steadily over time. And that slow and steady is actually pretty profound and makes a huge, sustainably meaningful difference in the quality of my life. Because as I evolve slowly and steadily in my consciousness, I feel more open-hearted, more present, more fulfilled. And it's sustainably more fulfilled. There's still peaks and troughs within it, but it's dependably trending in the direction of greater presence and wholeness. That's really strong, solid, grounded. Whereas I'm going to race to some big breakthrough, that's coming from insecurity. So can we accept, hey, this is my state of consciousness right now. I'm in fear a lot of the time. I'm unconscious a lot of the time. I project a lot of the time. Whatever the truth is, whatever that looks like for you in your relationship, whatever your neediness looks like, can you accept your neediness? And therefore, love yourself even more by accepting your neediness. Where I am is perfect. How can I get the most out of this situation with my partner? I deserve to be here. They deserve to be here. How can we work together where we are to not just accept this is who we are and we're going to stay here forever, but accept this is where we are now, make the most of it now while we continue our desire for greater wholeness and greater sovereignty. And that is the discernible way to get the most out of these two extremes from my perspective. I personally don't think you need me to tell you you should evolve. I think you're already addicted to evolution or sold on the idea of evolving. So I think the main message here that I want to share from my heart to yours is that sometimes the even more loving thing to do is to accept and honor your imperfection and work from that place. So I'm going to let you sit with that, discern what to do with that. Where you are is perfect. I love you. Thanks for tuning in. Keep an eye out for future meditation courses when I get back from India. And if you haven't left a review here, please do. This is a really interesting topic that we played around with today and exploring some different extremes with the whole thing. All worth considering. Peace out. I'll see you guys next time.